the one and only Stevie Nicks, whose songs have touched the lives of millions. She's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee twice over.
She's the woman who defined what it meant to be a rock goddess for over 5 decades. With her flowing shawls, platform boots, and voice that could shatter hearts, Stevie Nicks became more than just a musician. She became a legend, the mystical white witch of rock and roll, who sold over 120 million records and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, once with Fleetwood Mac and once as a solo artist. Her songs, Dreams, Landslide, and Rhiannon, became the soundtrack to millions of lives. She influenced everyone from Taylor Swift to Harry Styles, proving that women could dominate rock music on their own terms. But at 77 years old, behind the carefully crafted mystique and the velvet voice that made her famous, Stevie Nicks carries secrets that would break your heart. A hidden battlefield of pain, broken health, endless loneliness, and tragedies that fame could never protect her from. There's a choice she made in 1979 that still wakes her up crying in the middle of the night. There are 8 years of her life she can barely remember, stolen by something her doctor told her was safe. There's a name she whispers sometimes, Sarah, a daughter who never got to exist. And there's one man, the first one, who she's never really stopped loving even after more than 40 years apart. Behind her legacy lies a story not glamorous, but devastating. Stephanie Lynn Nicks was born on May 26, 1948 in Phoenix, Arizona, into a family where music ran deep in the blood. Her grandfather, Aaron Jess Nicks, had been a country singer, and from the moment Stevie could talk, he recognized something special in her voice. He'd have her sing at family gatherings, telling everyone that this little girl was going to be famous someday. Then he died when she was just a child, never living to see his prediction come true. That loss marked Stevie early, teaching her that the people you love leave you, a lesson that would repeat throughout her life. Her father, Jess Nicks Sr., was a corporate executive whose job required the family to move constantly. By the time Stevie was a teenager, she'd lived in dozens of cities across the Southwest. She never felt rooted anywhere, never had lasting friendships, always felt like an outsider looking in. Her mother, Jess, had been a beauty queen who gave up her own dreams to follow her husband's career and raise children. Stevie watched her mother's sacrifice and made a silent vow that she would never let anyone make her choose between love and her own ambitions. On her 16th birthday, her grandfather's guitar was given to her, one of the few things left from him. She taught herself to play and wrote her first song almost immediately. Music became her escape from the instability of constant moves and the loneliness of always being the new girl. At San Jose State University, she joined a band called Fritz and met a young guitarist named Lindsey Buckingham. The chemistry between them was instant and electric, both musically and romantically. They fell in love fast and hard, the kind of consuming young love where you can't imagine life without the other person. In 1971, Stevie made a decision that would set the pattern for the rest of her life. She dropped out of college just months before graduation to pursue music full-time with Lindsey. Her father was furious, calling her foolish and irresponsible. But Stevie had tasted performing, and she couldn't go back to a normal life. She and Lindsey formed a duo called Buckingham Nicks and moved to Los Angeles with dreams of making it big. Instead, they barely survived. For years, they struggled in poverty that most people can't imagine. Stevie worked as a waitress and cleaned houses to pay rent. They ate one meal a day to save money. In 1973, they released an album called Buckingham Nicks that was critically praised but commercially flopped. The label dropped them without hesitation. Stevie was 25 years old, broke, exhausted, and starting to wonder if her father had been right. She seriously considered giving up music entirely and going back to finish her degree. Then, on New Year's Eve 1974, the phone rang and changed everything. Mick Fleetwood, drummer of the struggling British blues band Fleetwood Mac, had heard the Buckingham Nicks album. He wanted Lindsay to join as guitarist. Lindsay said he'd only do it if Stevie came too. Fleetwood agreed, and just like that, Stevie Nicks joined Fleetwood Mac. Within a year, everything changed. Their 1975 self-titled album, Fleetwood Mac, sold over 7 million copies. Stevie's song Rhiannon became a massive hit. At 27 years old, she went from cleaning houses to selling out arenas. The sudden fame was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. But success came with a price that started showing immediately. The pressure of constant touring and recording put unbearable strain on Stevie and Lindsay's relationship. He became controlling, criticizing her performances and trying to manage every aspect of her career. She wanted independence and space to develop her own identity beyond being Lindsay's girlfriend. The fights became vicious and frequent. By the time they started recording their next album in 1976, their relationship was imploding. What followed became rock and roll legend. The album Rumors was recorded while the band was falling apart from the inside. Stevie and Lindsay had broken up, but still had to work together every day. Christine and John McVie, the married couple in the band, were divorcing. Mick Fleetwood discovered his wife was having an affair with his best friend. The studio became a war zone fueled by heartbreak, rage, and mountains of cocaine. Stevie wrote Dreams in just 10 minutes after a particularly brutal fight with Lindsay. The song that would become Fleetwood Mac's only #1 hit was born from her devastation at watching their love die. Lindsay wrote Go Your Own Way as his bitter goodbye to her, with lyrics that she found cruel and humiliating. But they still had to perform these songs together every night, reliving their breakup over and over for audiences who had no idea what they were really witnessing. The album Rumors sold over 40 million copies and became one of the best-selling albums of all time. It also nearly destroyed everyone involved in making it. As Fleetwood Mac's fame exploded, Stevie began a relationship with Don Henley, the drummer of the Eagles. Both bands were at the absolute peak of their success, and both Stevie and Don were deep in the cocaine-fueled excess of late 1970s rock and roll. The relationship was passionate, intense, and toxic. Then, in 1979, Stevie discovered she was pregnant with Don's baby. She was 31 years old, and she faced an impossible choice. Fleetwood Mac was planning their biggest tour yet. She was finally being recognized as a songwriter and artist in her own right, not just Lindsay's girlfriend or the female singer in the band. Having a baby would mean stepping away from the band at its commercial peak. It would mean depending on a man again, something she'd sworn never to do. She believed, probably correctly, that if she left to have a baby, the band would replace her and her solo career would never happen. Stevie decided to not keep the baby, a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She wrote a song called Sarah, about the daughter she never had, about the name she would have given her baby. Don Henley also wrote a song called Sarah, and while both have been cryptic about the exact meaning, those who knew them understood what the songs were really about. The relationship with Don ended shortly after, destroyed by grief and guilt that neither of them could articulate. Years later, Stevie would say in interviews that choosing her career over that baby was the biggest regret of her life. She said she knew she would have been a great mother, but she'd chosen Fleetwood Mac instead. The loss was compounded by more tragedy. Stevie's best friend since teenage years, Robin Snyder Anderson, was diagnosed with leukemia. Stevie watched helplessly as Robin deteriorated, and in 1982, Robin died, leaving behind her husband, Kim, and their infant daughter, Sarah. Yes, she had named her daughter Sarah. And Stevie was the godmother. In her grief and desperation to save something of Robin, Stevie made a decision that shocked everyone. She married Kim Anderson just months after Robin's death. The marriage lasted only 3 months before Stevie realized what she was doing. She wasn't in love with Kim. She was trying to become Robin, to step into her best friend's life and pretend she hadn't lost her. She was trying to become a mother to baby Sarah, to fill the void left by her decision 3 years earlier. The annulment was painful and awkward, and Stevie lost not just a husband, but also access to the child she'd tried to save. It was another loss stacked on top of all the others, another piece of her heart that she'd never get back. By the mid-1980s, Stevie's substance struggles had spiraled completely out of control. Her doctor warned her bluntly that her life was at risk if she didn't stop. In 1986, at age 38, she checked herself into the Betty Ford Clinic for 30 days of treatment. Getting clean was a heroic accomplishment that saved her life. But then her psychiatrist prescribed a tranquilizer called Klonopin for anxiety and stress. He promised it would help her creativity and make everything easier. Instead, it stole 8 years of her life. From 1987 to 1993, Stevie became dependent on Klonopin and barely remembers those years. The prescription medication turned her into what she later described as a zombie. She gained over 50 pounds. She couldn't write songs or create. She went through the motions of performing, but the spark that made her Stevie Nicks was gone, buried under the fog of medication. The doctor kept increasing her dosage instead of helping her stop. She lost nearly a decade of her creative prime because a doctor told her a pill would solve her problems. When Stevie finally realized what was happening in 1993, she faced a withdrawal process she described as the worst experience of her life. She checked into Daniel Freeman Hospital for 47 days of medically supervised treatment. The process was brutal, with seizures and severe physical symptoms. When she finally emerged, she was free but permanently changed. Her voice was different, deeper and raspier. Her songwriting had been affected. She was 45 years old and felt like she'd lost years she could never recover. Throughout this darkness, her romantic life followed a devastating pattern. After Lindsay came Mick Fleetwood, her bandmate. They had a relationship while he was married, and she believed it was real love. When he returned to his wife, Stevie was shattered. She poured her heartbreak into Silver Springs, a song so raw it was cut from the Rumors album. Decades later, she said he had crushed her heart completely. Then came Joe Walsh, the Eagles guitarist she dated in the early 1980s. He wanted marriage and stability. She wanted to focus on her solo career, which was exploding with Belladonna selling over 4 million copies. Once again, she chose music over love. Joe married someone else, and Stevie watched from the sidelines, questioning her choice. The pattern repeated endlessly. Men wanted her to sacrifice her career, or she wanted commitment they couldn't give. By 50, she'd accepted she would probably be alone forever. But the question of children haunted her most deeply. The decision in 1979 wasn't the only time she'd faced that choice. Her lyrics and interviews hinted at other moments when she chose career over motherhood. The era demanded you couldn't be a mother and a rock star simultaneously. Nobody had proven it possible, and Stevie didn't believe she could be the first. Her song Landslide, written at just 27, reveals her fear of changing because she'd built everything around one dream. Even then, she was wondering if she was making the right choices. When Robin passed away and left baby Sarah behind, Stevie had tried to step in as a mother figure. Her brief marriage to Kim was a desperate attempt to create the family she'd never had, to raise the child she'd never given birth to. When that fell apart after 3 months, she lost not just a husband, but also her chance to be a mother to Sarah. The little girl eventually grew up barely knowing her godmother. It was another relationship destroyed by Stevie's inability to balance her career with human connection. As the years passed, Stevie became godmother to several children of friends and bandmates. She tried to fill the void by being the fun aunt who showed up with presents and stories. But at the end of every visit, she went home alone, to an empty house. She watched her friends' children grow up, get married, have their own children. By 2001, when she was 53 years old, the reality set in that it was truly too late for her to have her own children. In a television interview, she broke down discussing it, saying she could have had a beautiful daughter named Sarah, who would be in her 20s, maybe giving her grandchildren. Instead, she had platinum records and an empty house. By the time COVID-19 hit in 2020, Stevie was 72 years old and considered high risk due to her history of health problems. She isolated completely in her house for months. While families sheltered together and couples quarantined as a unit, Stevie was alone, except for her assistant. The isolation crystallized something she'd been avoiding for years. She really was alone in the most fundamental way. There was no partner to isolate with, no children to worry about, no grandchildren to video chat with. Just her in a big house with her memories and her regrets. At 77, Stevie Nicks still performs when her body allows it. She still wears the shawls and boots, still twirls on stage for audiences who adore her. But backstage and at home, she faces the full weight of her choices. Her net worth stands at $120 million, proof of extraordinary commercial success. She's influenced generations of artists and redefined what it meant to be a woman in rock and roll. She proved female artists could write their own songs, control their careers, and become legends on their own terms. But money can't buy back the years lost to prescription medication. Fame can't resurrect the friends who've died. Platinum records don't hold you when you're scared or lonely. She has no children to visit, no grandchildren to spoil, no family legacy beyond the music. The songs will outlive her, but there's no one to carry on her name. No one who'll remember the real Stevie beyond the public persona. In recent interviews, she's become more open about her regrets. She discusses the decision in 1979 that still brings tears 4 decades later. She wonders if she could have found a way to have both career and family. But she also acknowledges the reality of her era. Women in the 1970s and 80s weren't given the option of having both. The music industry demanded everything. And if you weren't willing to sacrifice your personal life, there were countless others ready to take your place. She's tried making peace with Lindsey Buckingham, the man she never stopped loving even after their relationship ended over 40 years ago. They've performed together on and off through the decades. In 2018, he was removed from Fleetwood Mac after conflicts with band members. Stevie has admitted she played a role in that decision, and the guilt visibly weighs on her. Maybe she never stopped loving him, and maybe that was always the problem. How do you move forward when part of you remains stuck in 1976, wondering what might have been? She's forgiven Mick Fleetwood for breaking her heart. She's forgiven the other men who disappointed her or whom she disappointed. But the person she can't forgive is herself. She can't forgive herself for choosing music over motherhood, for the relationships she sabotaged because she was too afraid to be vulnerable. The choices that seemed necessary then look different at 77 when looking back at what might have been. What she gave the world was extraordinary. She wrote some of rock's most iconic songs: Dreams, Landslide, Rhiannon, Silver Springs, Sarah. Each one a masterpiece born from pain and transformed into art that millions connected with. She inspired countless female artists, from Courtney Love to Florence Welch to Taylor Swift. She proved women could be complex, mystical, powerful, and commercially successful simultaneously. She sold over 120 million records and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, an honor almost no one achieves. But what she lost was equally extraordinary: the children she never had, the marriages that could have been, the stability she craved her entire life, her health sacrificed to decades of struggle. 8 years lost to medication a doctor promised was safe. Piece after piece of her soul, given to heartbreaks, she turned into songs. The real tragedy of Stevie Nicks isn't one devastating event. It's the accumulation of choices made under impossible pressure, in an era that forced women to choose between art and life, in an industry that demanded everything and gave back fame that couldn't fill the empty spaces left behind. At 77, she's still standing when so many of her contemporaries are gone. She's still performing, still writing, still the mystical white witch that fans adore. But she's also profoundly alone in ways that success was supposed to prevent. She's surrounded by millions who love her music, but nobody who truly knows the woman behind it. She won every battle in her career and lost every war in her personal life. She achieved the dreams she sang about and lost everything else in the process. That's the heartbreaking truth about Stevie Nicks. She became a legend, but legends are lonely. She gave us dreams, but she couldn't keep her own. She sang about landslides, and not knowing if she could handle the seasons of her life, not knowing she was predicting her own future. She has everything that rock and roll promised: the fame, the fortune, the immortality through her music. But she doesn't have the one thing that would have actually made her happy. Stevie Nicks stands alone as one of the last survivors of rock and roll's most legendary era. She won by every measure that the music industry uses to define success. But she also lost in every way that actually matters when you're an aging woman looking back at the choices that defined your life. That's the tragedy. She spent her life creating magic for everyone else, but she couldn't create the magic that would have saved her from this profound loneliness. She's the witch who lost her spell, the dreamer who woke up to find the dream was empty, the legend who would trade it all for just one more chance at the ordinary life she walked away from so long ago.